Now, of course, we do start with our big story here. Voters are headed to the polls in primary contests across 5 states, including Donald Trump's home state of Florida. The former president casting his ballot in Palm Beach just a short time ago. The other states holding contests, looking at Illinois, Kansas, and Ohio, which is holding a high-profile Senate primary on the Republican side. The Trump-endorsed candidate, businessman Bernie Moreno, is battling against 2 other Republicans to take on the Democratic incumbent, Sherrod Brown. That's happening in November, of course. Now, this as Trump stirs more controversy with statements about January 6 committee members. So let's bring in our ABC News chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, to talk more about this. All right, John, so let's start with Ohio, shall we? Trump has backed the businessman, Bernie Moreno, and our partners at 538 say essentially right now he's tied in the polling with Senator Matt Dolan. So, John, do you think that tonight is a bit of a referendum on what a Trump endorsement really means?
I mean, it sure looks that way. Look, Trump was just in Ohio campaigning for Bernie Moreno. He's made that endorsement quite loud and vocal. He is the Trump candidate in this race, and Matt Dolan is really what's left of the Republican establishment, the pre-Trump Republican establishment candidate. He is the only one, Dolan is the only one of those 3 Republicans who actually says that the election wasn't stolen in 2020. So yes, this is a test for Donald Trump in Ohio. By the way, one other point on this is the Democrats have actually gone in to try to boost Bernie Moreno's candidacy. They've been advertising in Ohio saying he is too MAGA for Ohio, clearly something that is designed to help him because the Democrats think the Trump candidate, Bernie Moreno, would be much easier to beat in November.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, John, let's look at, first of all, Illinois, right? There's this movement that is calling for people to write in Gaza. And if you look at Arizona, there's some groups there that are calling for people to vote for Marianne Williamson instead of President Biden in their presidential preference election. John, we've seen these protest votes garner really hefty percentage of votes before. So how does the Biden campaign perceive that message?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily going to be quite as big today in the states you mentioned, but this is a problem. I mean, we saw a significant number of votes for uncommitted in Michigan. We saw the same thing happen in Minnesota. We saw a significant number in North Carolina and Virginia go to non-Biden candidates in a race which really doesn't have a viable non-Biden candidates. These are protest votes from Democrats that Biden is going to need to have come back on board to beat Trump in November.
All right, now let's talk about Trump's retribution. He's been threatening retribution against political opponents for some time now. Nobody knows it better than you. You quite literally wrote the book on it, right? But it seems like this rhetoric is escalating a bit on social media, calling for Liz Cheney and other members of the January 6th committee to be jailed. John, what's standing out to you from these comments? And are his threats of retribution, I mean, seemingly or in actuality, getting more and more specific?
Yeah, I think they have to be taken seriously. You and I have spoken about how this has really been a theme for his campaign. He has talked about retribution. He said quite famously as he was launching his campaign, "I am your retribution." That's his message to his supporters. He's talked about annihilating and eliminating the deep state and our political enemies. But in this case, he is very specifically saying that members of Congress who investigated his actions as part of that January 6th committee should be sent to jail. I mean, he is saying this in all caps on his social media platform, and it's consistent with what he's been saying for over a year now throughout his campaign, but it is specific, and he is somebody who has made it clear that he wants to use the Justice Department to accomplish his political goals.
And you're talking about what he's saying on social media. There's this social media thread that Trump also questioned if Cassidy Hutchinson, a former White House aide and one of the key witnesses to the January 6th committee, should be prosecuted because, John, he's claiming in this radio interview today that there's a Secret Service agents, or several, that will refute her testimony. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, it's frankly outrageous to see Cassidy Hutchinson, who was as a young woman working in the Trump White House, just steps from the Oval Office, and she came forward, a total Trump supporter, but she was there. She witnessed what was happening on January 6th. She testified when many of the older and more senior, frankly, men in the Trump White House were hiding behind privilege and refusing to talk. She told her story to the committee. And now he is out there saying this. She has already been somebody who has faced death threats, who has been harassed by Trump supporters ruthlessly since she first testified. And look, her testimony has largely held up what she has told the January 6th committee. There is a dispute about what happened inside the president's car after his speech on January 6th. She told what had been described to her by a senior Secret Service official, and nobody has disputed that conversation took place. Some have said they couldn't recall it. But there are disputes about what happened inside the car. But to go out there and say that she should be prosecuted is really beyond the pale.
All right. Well, I know that you'll keep watching that for us. John Karl, thank you so much for your time today. I want to bring our big story to our panel now. Joining us today is our ABC News contributor and SiriusXM radio host, Mike Muse, our former Republican congressman from New York, John Katko, former Democratic senator from North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp, and ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the Los Angeles Times, LZ Granderson. So thank you all for being here with us today. John, let's start here with you. Looking at these early races, I know that, John, you sort of consider these races, right, a barometer for the standard bearer of each party. So what are you watching for?
I'm just watching for kind of what the down ballot performance is and exactly what Jonathan Karl was just talking about. And that is, what is the influence of Trump in places like key Senate races like Ohio? And that's going to be a barometer for the fall, because don't forget, they've got to get the moderate and the swing vote in the fall. And this will be a very, very close race. So what you were talking about with respect to the rhetoric, I want to see what that has an impact on these down ballot races as well. What's remarkable about Trump is he is really using incendiary rhetoric long after he should have learned his lesson after January 6th. And that's perhaps the most troubling thing, and something I want to see going forward, how that's going to unfold in the campaign.
Right, how that will impact voters. LZ, I know you covered Arizona, right, in 2020. So, LZ, how are you going to watch the numbers come in tonight? And then how do you analyze the protest vote that potentially happens, in Arizona today? And then you compare that to the primary that Arizona will have in July when independents can take part.
Excellent series of questions, and I have no idea, Kana. I'm going to be holding on by the seat of my pants just like you. I can tell you in 2020, though, it was a very unnerving place to be in the country. I don't know how many of the panelists recall, but there were more than 5 recount efforts in Arizona, really focused in on where most of the minorities in the state were located. And one of the main voices that come out of that was Kari Lake, who is a Senate candidate in the primary. She's a close Trump ally, and the question is, will Trump's connection with Kari Lake hurt her in this primary? We do know that the state government, the state Republicans in Arizona, actually were caught trying to bribe Kari not to run. They were so fearful of Trump's impact on this race. And so I'm really fascinated to see how this is going to play out in Arizona when it comes to the GOP. And when it comes to the Democratic side, I think based upon my reporting over the last couple of weeks, and particularly in Michigan, there has been progressives that have been pleased to see that the Biden administration has been more assertive in trying to get Netanyahu and Israel to be more cautious when it comes to the innocent victims who are being killed in Gaza.
So they see that as the response to their protest votes. Mike, to you. Yeah. All right, Mike, let's talk about Ohio, if we can, right? So Republicans need to flip 2 seats to take control of the Senate in 2025. And in terms of what's happening in Ohio, I know you sort of look at it as, right, a showdown, the old guard versus the new guard of the GOP?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have Dolan, who has been endorsed by the governor, DeWine. They are more the moderate wing of the Republican Party, up against Marino, who has been endorsed by Trump, and also, too, has been endorsed by J.D. Vance, and they've been stomping along the trail with former President Trump. Ohio is always going to be a key battleground state, but it matters even more so this election cycle, as the Senate is essentially up for grabs, and it's going to come down to a few states, which is going to be Ohio, West Virginia, and also too, within Arizona. And so depending upon who can win in combination of those states would determine who can control the Senate. Ohio has a chance because DeWine, the governor, is more the moderate side of the aspect of it, to see where, I think tonight we'll be able to see where the GOP in Ohio is centered, the direction they want to go in, and who are they beholden to. So I think today will actually be a bellwether test for how the general election could shape up.
Absolutely. And again, I really do think it will see how important Donald Trump's endorsement is to some of these candidates. And Heidi, though, I'd like to get your take on the rhetoric that we are hearing from Donald Trump.
Well, it's incredibly dangerous to attack Cassie Hutchinson. I mean, it's just beyond the pale, as John said. And you know what? The question is, will there be any consequences at the ballot box? Will there be down ballot responses? And so the more Trump does this, yes, you know, maybe it energizes the MAGA faction of his base, but he can't win with MAGA alone. He has got to get moderates, and this language is not helpful. And a lot of the candidates that he's selecting, I think the Republicans are concerned that this is going to be the midterms all over, where these very extreme candidates will lose the opportunity to win the Senate back. And so we'll wait and see. But, you know, when I think about candidates, think about what a Mark Robinson does in North Carolina to depress the turnout of moderate Republicans. These down ballot races where you have extreme candidates could in fact determine presidential races. And so it'll be interesting to watch.
Right. We heard our political director, Rick Klein, say is what's best for Trump, best for the Republican Party. And that, of course, remains to be seen. Mike, John, Heidi, Nalzir, thanks to all of you. No, John has strong opinions about it.
Yes, I do.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.